With the dusty burning fields behind him, we find Graven arriving in Redridge, a rather mountainous region on the opposite side of Elwyn Forest. Crossing a mighty bridge, we find ourselves within the town of Lakeshire. Yet we haven't a moment to lose as we make our way into the town hall to search for the local magistrate. It would appear the local citizenry are keen to speak with him as well. Meeting the magistrate Solomon, we relay the news of Westfall. Solomon is sympathetic, but Redridge is under crisis as well. Citizens are going missing left and right, and the local guards are already spread too thin. They are in search of a hero. Well, they're certainly in luck, it would seem. They suspect the gnolls to the north are responsible. However, there's another small matter. Due to the size of the region and the high canyons, the only method of communicating in the field requires a gnome quarter. However, Lakeshire's only remaining one was stolen by murlocs. Graven is starting to notice that gnolls and murlocs are a reoccurring threat in these lands. Agreeing to retrieve the gnome quarter, he learns from Bailiff Konatcher two things. One, there's already a bounty on the murlocs. And two, the Night Watch of Duskwood are pleading for help. Graven agrees, however, that the current matters within Redridge must take priority. As we leave the town hall to check in at the Lakeshire Inn, we hear the citizens ask, "Where is the help we requested from Stormwind?" They must have expected ranks of troops, but you quickly realize it is Graven and the adventurers around him that have been sent. Attempting to gather his bearings, Graven sets out to the docks to have a look around, but is soon confronted by a small boy. His friend Nita had lost her favorite necklace while they were fishing, but they were told never to swim in the lake due to monsters. These monsters are, however, no match for Graven. Seeking to help calm the fears of the citizens of Lakeshire, he dives right in after the lost necklace. It doesn't take him much time before it's retrieved and back in the hands of the rather grateful young girl. Of course, her adorable black kitten is equally pleased. Passing through what is meant to be a rather large boulder pinning down a local citizen, we rush to the reported Murloc camp along Lake Everstill. There we take back the gnome quarter, as well as cull a rather insignificant number of the ever-repopulating fish minions. One rare dragon spawn later, we return to the town hall and present the recovered gnome quarter. Luckily, the device appears to be functional. However, to be sure, the magistrate tells us to head out of town to test its functionality. A short chat with the bailiff nets us some rewards for our Murloc bounty, and we're back out the door. On our way out of town, we once again see the bridge workers attempting to move a stubborn invisible boulder from a form in Oslo. We confer with Marshal Maris, who tells us of the raiding gnolls in the hills, and requests we recover several crates of stolen supplies. Once at the graveyard just outside of town, the gnome quarter crackles to life, and Magistrate Solomon directs us to beat back the Redridge gnolls. We notice, however, that he first refers to them as gnomes. It appears the magistrate might not be too fond of our smaller stature allies. Regardless, we're off to slaughter once more. As we hack and slash our way through the enemy's alliance, we find a dirt-stained scroll. We've been warned about the large giant Enten roaming about, and it appears the gnolls are using a magical orb to control them. This Ardo Dirtpaw will have to be put down. After recovering a sizable amount of gnoll collars, we report back to the magistrate. We learn that it appears the Blackrock Orcs are in league with the gnolls. He presses us to head for the nearby caverns and kill any dark-skinned orcs we find, searching their corpses for information. Shortly after arriving in the cave, we encountered the reported orcs. Diving into combat, we relinquished from them their gathered missive. The reports were correct. However, these particular orcs are actually under the direction of a gnoll, a rather intelligent one named Yowler. We are pressed to remove this leader as soon as possible. Yet before we can head for Yowler, this Ardo Dirtpaw is to be dealt with. Further into the cave, we find him standing before an eerie orb. After silencing this rather cunning gnoll, we collect the orb, quickly realizing that with this orb we can now control the Enten. We think back to that invisible crushing boulder. Perhaps these giants can be of some use. But first, Yowler. The mangy mutt puts up a decent fight at first, but his nerves do not pierce Graven's unholy visage, and he attempts to flee. Cut down, we recover a set of Black Rock invasion plans. I would like to apologize for the following quest, so I paused it here. Basically, there's supposed to be a boulder here that's crushing the foreman, and it's not there, it's missing. Well, that actually bugs out the rest of the quest. So when we click on the orb, when we bring the Enten down and we've controlled him and subdued him, and we bring him to where the boulder is supposed to be, we did click on the orb. It technically let us finish the quest in our quest log, but what's supposed to happen is that the Enten's supposed to pick up the boulder and throw the boulder, and then the Enten just kind of like stands off to the side and is kind of like a permanent member there for a little bit at least. I don't remember if he's always there, but it's supposed to be there, and unfortunately, since there's no boulder, it lets us finish the quest, but it doesn't give the Enten anything to do, so he just follows us around until we log out. Unfortunately, I didn't log out. I was trying to test a few things out. I didn't log out until we start part of the next quest. So there is part of the first start of the next quest chain with the Colonel that kind of gets cut off. So apologies, and we'll just pick it back from there. Thanks for watching. With the foreman's save, we return the stolen supplies to Marshal Maris, who is quite pleased, in fact. Reporting back to Magistrate Solomon, we hand over the invasion plans. We find out that we're up against the Shadowhide army, and a General Gathlazog is behind it. He means to conquer Lakeshire and attack Stormwind directly. After also informing the magistrate about Foreman Oslo, a rather impressively dressed gentleman approaches from the crowds. The man goes by the name of Colonel Troutman, and he talks about a man that might be able to save Lakeshire from these filthy Blackrock orcs, a man named John J. Keshen. This man had served in all 3 wars against the orcs, and even survived being captured for 5 years. The colonel tells us he's the only one that can stop General Gathlazog. We're directed to head to the basement of Lakeshire Inn, and tell John all that we know to try to enlist his help. Traveling to the basement, we find John in a bare-knuckle boxing match against a man named Big Earl. We plead our case, but it's clear that the last war was just too much. But it wasn't just the treatment by the hand of his captors. It was the treatment of his fellow citizens, those that asked him to go off and fight. After surviving in shit and piss for 5 years, he returned home to an ungrateful nation. Citizens spat and protested his return, labeling him an orc baby killer and a host of other slurs. No, this war wasn't his war anymore. Returning to Troutman, we are surprised to hear the colonel is not giving up on John just yet. He believed in order to rouse the slumbering beast from within him, he'll need additional motivation. We're tasked with recovering his signature weapons, a bow and survival knife, from the hands of his orc captors. We also learn about Bravo Company, and then if we can find his old comrades, we'd have a much better chance. Messner, Jorgensen, Crocker, and Danforth. The colonel isn't sure where they are, or even if they're alive, but asks us to look for them nonetheless. Heading out for the mill, we run into Foreman Oslo, who is of course grateful for our aid with a boulder. He spent his life working on the bridge, and he'll be damned if he lets orcs ruin his life work. He asks us to recover some spyglasses from the orc to be repurposed as surveying gear. The marshal besides him is a bit more practical, simply asking us to slay as many orcs as we can. Not thinking it'll stop the invasion, but certainly to slow them down. Riding eastward, we come across Alther's Mill, and we descend upon the filthy curs. A tinging voice whispers in Graven's mind, a faint distant chill and a vision of a disty snowy mountain. Yet we snap back to reality when we come across a cage, and realize one of the fabled members of Bravo Company is still alive. Messner agrees to help us against the orcs and get John back into the fight, but first we'll need to free him from that cage. Making our way towards the key's location, we spot Hormerk and Gordunk. In their clutches house John's bow and knife, which these wise orcs simply hand over without a fight. Well, of course, you can call their paltry attacks fighting, but even combined, they aren't much of a match for a seasoned Death Knight. With these items in our possession, we radio into the Colonel. He informs us that these 2 weapons are only half of the gear that'll help snap John out of his funk. In order to truly get his heart into battle, we'll need to recover his scarlet headband and a jade amulet left to him by his late wife, whom was slaughtered in a previous Blackrock orc invasion. Securing them should help reignite the fire within John. Keying off the radio, we turn our attention back to another key. Nestling in amongst the host of sleeping Blackrock battle wargs, we move swiftly, although stealthily. Avoiding a roaming patrol, and without a single beast rousing, we recover the key. Freeing Messner, we learn that Jorgensen's being held in Render's camp to the north. However, we'll need to pry the key from the dead grasp of Ultraka, the key mistress. As we make our way to her last known location, we do Foreman Oslo a favor, and collect up some of those spyglasses he was so keen to request. With the warlock Utraka slain and the key secured, we move swiftly towards the Render's camp. Finding Jorgensen, he tells us that Crocker and Danforth are in the cave, prepping to be made into sacrifices. We've got to hurry. Turns out the orcs enlisted a Gurabashi witch doctor to perform a dark ritual on Crocker, and we'll need to slay the witch doctor in order to free him. As we turn right just inside the cave, Graven and the others spot ritualistic Tarak, Crocker, and a rather hefty chest. The witch doctor isn't easy to put down, but with him slain we recover John's lost valuables and free Crocker from the ritualistic altar. We learn that Danforth is moments away from being sacrificed deeper in the cave. However, as we turn to leave, we learn that Tarak isn't actually dead. The salty bastard needs to be put down twice to finish the job. Recovering from the fight with the witch doctor, we make our way further within the cave. Cresting an outcrop, we descend upon Overlord Barbarius and his ilk at the back of the cave. Soon we're wrestling against his orcish might. The swings of his mighty axe even knock the weakened Crocker to the cold dirt of the cave. However, in the end, the Overlord falls, and with a pull of the lever, Danforth drops from his change. Recovering both Danforth and Crocker, the party agrees to meet back in Lakeshire. A short Hearthstone later, we find ourselves back in Lakeshire Inn. Graven checks in on the foreman and the marshal first. The spy glasses will help the foreman create an even bigger bridge, one that'll span the entire lake. The marshal feels our efforts have bought Lakeshire maybe probably 1 or 2 more days at best, which is still something worth doing. Of course, our main focus turns towards Colonel Troutman. The Colonel is beyond impressed, saving the entirety of Bravo Company and recovering John's belongings. There's no way John can refuse to help us now. He tells us to return to the basement, that the rest of Bravo Company is already waiting, and to convince John who drew first blood. Returning to the basement, we find John with his comrades all around him. It is then that we present him with all of his recovered belongings. His bow, his knife, his wife's jade amulet. Looking down at his recovered belongings, we see John reach for the bandana. Placing the scarlet cloth against his forehead, we can see the fire lit within his eyes once more. He speaks to us. We have orcs to kill. Meeting up with Bravo Company at the shore, Messner makes clever use of his mage's abilities to rocket the boat across the lake in record time. Reaching Camp Eversill, we clamber from the boat and get our bearings. However, the first order of business is proper recon, yet in order to do that, we'll need to gather supplies to build out a field kit. We'll need to gather up camouflage to remain hidden, chloroform to knock out distracted guards, as well as find a local contact by the name of Brewbreaker. Diving into the lake, we cool off as we collect glands from some local muck dwellers. The properties of these fish will stop even the mightiest of orc warrior dead in his tracks. With a suitable number of glands collected, we make for the shore. There, we set out to gather up the ingredients required for our camouflage, although we soon find ourselves under constant attack from roaming orc hunters. Despite these constant attacks, we manage to collect just enough materials. With the contents of the field kit gathered, we travel northward, towards the last known location of our contact. However, to our dismay, when we reach the location, we find that Brewbreaker has not survived. Clearly left as a warning from the orcs, we search Brewbreaker's corpse nonetheless, and we discover a note left in his pocket, addressed to John specifically. The orcs are committing unspeakable acts against their prisoners. Their prisoners, the missing people of Lakeshire. The orcs have them, and will need to rescue them. Rushing back to Camp Everstill, we report to Bravo Company the situation. This has just got things a lot more complicated. With Jorgensen at our side, we make our way deep into enemy territory, using the field kit we gathered to keep us camouflaged. We distract our way through the guards as we trek across Render's Valley. Making our way to a cluster of cages, we find the missing citizens of Lakeshire. However, without a key, we are unable to free them. Tearing open the cages would make just too much noise. We recall back to our intelligence from Brewbreaker that a key is tucked away inside a cave across the valley. Making our way back through the throngs of orcs, we find ourselves at the cave. With a silent motion, we knock out the guard watching the key and quickly make our escape. Rushing back to the cages, we free the POWs and make contact with John. It is then that the second phase of the mission begins. Having been given some powerful C4M charges, we are instructed to plant them in 2 locations, the Blackrock Tower and Munitions Hut. The orcs are on high alert, and we have to carefully navigate their camp to avoid detection. However, luck must be on our side as we manage to plant the charges and stealth our way to Shellwind Canyon. There, meeting up with the rest of Bravo Company, we watch as we tear Render Valley apart. Leaving it nothing but a dusty crater. With the valley in ruins, we turn back towards Bravo Company. Having talked with a pair of locals, John learns that the gnolls within the valley are under the control of a powerful mage. However, we are unable to enter his tower without another key. Of course, the key is around the mangy neck of the gnoll General Fangor. On our way out, Danforth orders us to clear as many Shadowhide gnolls as we can. The fire and hate in his eyes burns within Graven's mind, and even reminds him of his past self. Rushing headlong into the valley, we carve a bloodied path, and in time we near General Fangor. With the assistance of a friendly warrior, Graven makes short work of the general, tearing him from his cave and staining the entrance with his guts. Relaying the news over the radio to John, we learn that the Magus is a human named Doeni. This traitor that conspires with orcs must pay. Rushing headlong into the tower with the aid of the warrior, our hero reaches the top. However, despite our combined ferocities, the Magus makes his escape, shouting something about cowering before Darkblaze as he vanishes, leaving us to finish off his summoned minions. With the cowards vanished, we make our way back to Bravo Company, report our findings. It almost appears as if John knows this Darkblaze character, but isn't able to share his story before Colonel Troutman arrives with a massive siege tank. He tells us the enemy is aware of our location and is rushing to stop us. We're ordered to push through their advance and meet up at Keshin Outpost just across the valley. With John manning the gun and Graven driving behind the controls, we press on. 200 orc warriors are cut down in a hail of bullets as they rush towards Bravo Company. Their combined might nearly halting our advance, but we're able to reach the outpost intact. Meeting up with Troutman, we are told that all that remains is the Orc High Command holdup in Stonewatch. With the entirety of Bravo Company at our side, we slog on, charging up the hill. The battle was bloody and violent, bodies littering the hillside. The team carved its way through the mighty Orc Thorazun, before pressing on towards General Gathlazog himself. Standing on the edge of a broken bridge, we encounter our goal. The monster waits. Graven can feel Bravo Company's hatred and their anger boiling over as they fight their most hated enemy. This Blackrock Orc gives them a battle that would echo through eternity. In the end, the Orc falls before their combined might. The heroes exhausted lick their wounds, but before they can catch their breath, the radio crackles. The Blackrocks have the upper hand. Bravo Company must get out. The radio cuts off just as a massive black dragon arrives. Transformed before their eyes, they see the powerful Magus, and it is revealed he is behind the invasion of Redridge, that the Orcs and Gnolls couldn't have orchestrated such a grand plan, that Bravo Company will serve as just a paltry offering for Deathwing's grand plan. Transforming back into the mighty dragon Darkblaze, the exhausted Bravo Company does its best to defeat the dragon. One by one our heroes fall. Messner, Jorgensen, Crocker, and Danforth all fall before his terrifying fire breath. All but John J. Keshin. The tormented hero of Bravo Company leaps upon the dragon's face, his knife hacking away at the dragon's skull. The fury of the man with nothing to lose carries the dragon into the air. "The world has enough heroes!" cries Darkblaze as John's knife finds its mark, and the two plummet to their deaths in the lake below. Alone and battered, Graven makes his way back to the outpost. Relaying the news to Troutman, a stone of a man, a single tear falls from his steely eyes. We are the last surviving member of Bravo Company. The Colonel orders us back to Lakeshire to share their story, that the cost of freedom with the lives of the Alliance's 5 finest heroes, that Redridge and ultimately Stormwind are safe for now. Returning to the Magistrate, we tell our story. We are presented with a gift for our noble deed. After dredging the lake, they were only able to recover 2 items, a Bravo Company ring, and a lone scarlet bandana. The story of Redridge is of heroes, of war, of sorrow. Bravo Company, heroes of the Alliance, gave their all, freed the captive citizens, and stopped an outright Orc invasion. As the Death Knight Graven steps outside, the weight of all that has happened falls upon him, and he begins to feel something he hasn't felt since long before his awakening. He feels his heart beat hard against his unholy chest. A tear falls from his icy blue eyes. Thank you for watching this episode. There are also a few additional side quests that aren't key to the achievement. In fact, if you had came to Redridge from Elwyn Forest, instead of flying, you would have encountered the tower just along the border. Within the tower, you have encountered Watch Captain Parker, his wife, and his daughter, as well as a few other random guards of the Alliance. It's pretty standard affair. You kill a couple monsters, you gain some experience. Nothing too key or important to the storyline of Redridge. Also inside Redridge, there's a small quest where Martin Jane Rose enlists you to kill a pesky boar that's been rooting through her garden. All in all, I'd say Redridge is one of my favorite zones. I do hope you all enjoyed and that you'll tune in for the next episode as we make our way into Duskwood. Have a good day. Goodbye.